You understand Korean, but when it's your turn to speak, you freeze. The words are in your head, you know this, but your mouth just won't move. If that feels familiar, this video is for you. Imagine describing this image in your native language. This dog likes strawberries. You didn't build that sentence word by word in your head, right? You just saw the image and the whole sentence appeared in your head. This dog likes strawberries. That is fluency. And that's exactly what we need to build in Korean. Whole Korean sentences that appear when you need them. Because if you have to build every Korean sentence word by word in a real conversation, of course you freeze. I know this feeling because I went through the same thing with English. I studied English for years in Korea. Grammar, vocabulary test. I could read. I could understand a lot, but when I had to speak, I froze. What changed everything wasn't more grammar. It was hours of listening and real conversations, even when my English wasn't perfect. Over time, English started to feel familiar. I stopped translating in my head, sentences just started appearing. That's what we are going to build. Korean that feels familiar to your ears, to your mouth, and your brain. So instead of just saying, practice speaking more, I want to give you a real framework you can actually follow. So here's the framework, 3 things. What it really means for Korean to feel familiar. Why listening has to come first and how to start speaking without freezing. So let's start with this question. What does it really mean for Korean to feel familiar? Think about the English word eat. When you hear eat, you don't translate it, right? You hear eat and your brain instantly understands the action. That's familiarity. Now Korean has to work the same way. When you hear the sound 먹어요, which means eat in Korean, the goal is not to think like this. Okay, 먹어요. It means eat. The goal is for your brain to connect sound to meaning instantly. 먹어요. 먹어요. No translation step, no grammar check, and the same thing has to happen with full sentences. So let's look at what usually happens when you try to speak Korean in a real conversation. Let's say someone look at this picture and ask you, what's the dog eating? In Korean. Most learners do this inside their head. Okay, what's the dog eating? Watermelon. Watermelon in Korean is 수박, and eat in Korean is 먹어요. So, 먹어요 수박? Oh wait, Korean verbs go at the end. So, watermelon, 수박, eat, 먹어요, 수박, 먹어요. In a real conversation, recalling grammar rules and assembling words isn't actually possible. When you are taking an exam, reading or writing, you have enough time to think about it, but we don't have enough time when we are having conversation in Korean. Imagine every sentence takes more than 5 seconds to build. That's why you freeze. The goal is different. When you want to say something, the sentence should just come out. Not assembled word by word, it just appears in your brain. The sound, the image, and the sentence are connected. So, if you want to speak Korean more naturally, the answer is not just more grammar study or more vocabulary memorization. You need to make Korean familiar. Familiar to your ears through listening, familiar to your mouth through speaking, and familiar to your brain through repetition. You already know how this feels in English. Now we need to give your brain enough Korean for the same thing to happen. So, the only real question is, how do you actually do it? The good news is that the answer is simple. There are 2 stages, listening first, then speaking. We are going to start with listening because it's the foundation everything else stands on. I know you came here for speaking, but listening isn't a side skill you do before speaking. It's the foundation that makes speaking actually possible. That's why we start here. Once this part clicks, the speaking steps you came for will actually work. So before we really get into speaking, let's talk about listening first. Think about how you learned your first language. You didn't sit in a classroom. Nobody handed you a grammar book. Your parents didn't translate. They just talked to you, sang to you, and pointed at things. For a year, sometimes longer, you just listened. Then slowly, words started coming out of your mouth. Then sentences. Then conversations. That's not a coincidence. That's how our brain actually builds language. Sounds come first, a lot of sound, a lot. Then output. If you try to speak before your brain has enough Korean sound stored up, it's like trying to cook without any ingredients. There's nothing for your brain to pull from. You just freeze. So the foundation is listening, a lot of it. But not just any listening. Here's how to do it the right way. There are 3 simple rules. First, 80% rule. Pick content you can already understand about 80% of without subtitles. This is the sweet point. It's hard enough that you're learning new patterns, but easy enough that meaning still comes through. If a video is too difficult, your brain cannot even guess what the sounds mean. There's no context to connect them to, so nothing sticks. This is why beginners watch K-dramas for months and years and barely improve. That input is too far above their level. The brain is not building anything from it. The minimum is around 50% comprehension. Below that, it mostly feels like noise. Aim for around 80% and you'll start to feel real progress. Second, skip the subtitles. Both kinds. Turn off translation subtitles and Korean subtitles, especially translation subtitles. If you watch K-dramas with English subtitles, you're basically reading English while Korean sound plays in the background. Your brain is not really listening to Korean. It's not focusing on it. Korean subtitles are a bit better, but your brain still drifts toward reading instead of connecting sound to meaning directly. Maybe you can turn them on briefly to check what you missed after you watched once without subtitles. Then turn them off and watch again. Subtitles should be a check, not something you rely on. Okay? Rule 3. Repeat the same content and use the time you already have. Most learners think watching new content every day means progress. It feels productive, but familiarity comes from repetition. I recommend you to listen to the same content 3 times. And here's something most people miss. Repetition unlocks time you didn't even know you had. The first time you watch something, you need full attention. Visual context matters, body language, facial expressions, what's happening on the screen. That's how your brain figures out meaning. After watching it once, you've already seen the visual cues and you roughly know what's going on. At that point, you don't need to watch anymore. You can just listen. And in your daily life, there are actually many moments where your ears are free, even when your body is busy. You can play Korean content like music in the car. You can listen while cooking or doing the dishes, while taking a taxi or walking somewhere, even while falling asleep. All of the time can become Korean exposure. This is powerful. It turns that time into Korean exposure. 1 hour of focused watching plus several hours of background listening each week adds up quickly. So here's a quick recap about listening. Choose content you understand about 80% of. Don't use subtitles. Repeat the same content many times. Then use your passive time like commuting, cooking, walking, or resting to keep listening. That's how you build the foundation. Once your ears start filling up with Korean sound, you're ready for the next step. Speaking. Now your brain has the ingredients, but using them is a skill on its own. And this is where most learners get it wrong. This is where many people struggle, even after a month of listening. So let me show you what actually works. Remember the 80% rule we use for listening. You choose content you can already understand around 80% of. Speaking follows the same idea, just applied differently. Speaking about topics where you can already express around 80% of what you want to say. Start where you already have the words food, weather, daily routines. For example, let's say you learn the word 마셔요, which means drink. 마셔요. Then try to make some sentence in your daily life like this. 우유 마셔요. 바나나 우유. 바나나 우유 마셔요. 바나나 우유 사랑해요. By the way, when you come to Korea, you have to try this banana milk. And how about this? If you like running, if you already know this word, then try to make some sentence with this vocabulary. 러닝 해요. 러닝 많이 해요. This is my dog Maru. 마루하고 러닝 해요. Like this. So start with a daily life situation where you already know some words. The right place to start depends on your level. We should build the feeling that speaking Korean is comfortable and even fun. So start small. A 1-minute chat about lunch, 2 minutes about your weekend, small wins. Each one teaches your brain, I can actually do this in Korean. Then you expand step by step, slowly. You don't talk about economics with a 3-year-old who is just learning to speak. You'd start with what they know and grow from there. The same logic applies to you with Korean. So, you need to stay in that same zone. Listen to and speak about things that are just slightly above your current level. If it's too easy, you won't grow. If it's too hard, you'll get stuck. That's where real progress happens. But there's another reason this level is so important. When Korean feels too hard, your brain doesn't relax. It starts protecting you. You get nervous, you worry about how you sound. Speaking starts to feel dangerous. And anxiety doesn't just feel bad. It actually blocks your brain from learning. Linguistics professor Stefan Krashen calls this the affective filter. When you're worried about how you sound, this filter rises and new language has a much harder time getting into your brain. Kids learn languages quickly because they don't think as much about how they sound. They haven't developed a strong self-image yet. Adults usually have. Around puberty, we become more aware of ourselves and start worrying more about how we come across to others. That worry can become a wall. So, here's the key idea. Don't aim for perfect. I know, but don't aim for perfect. Don't worry about mistakes. Aim to be understand. If your meaning gets across, even with broken grammar or the wrong words, you've succeeded. If you cannot express something, switch to a topic you can talk about. Don't push through frustration. Babies don't wait until they're perfect to start talking. Trying to build perfect sentences before you can hold a real conversation is like trying to run before you can walk. Walking comes first. Running comes later. So, don't rush the process. Becoming comfortable with a language takes time, and that's completely normal. Becoming comfortable with a language takes time. So, instead of trying to rush, try to enjoy the journey. So let me ask you this. What made you start learning Korean? Please leave it in the comments. I'm curious. So, how do you make speaking feel natural? There are 3 ways to practice, building up from solo practice to real conversation. First, shadowing. English and Korean sound very different. The rhythm, the mouth shapes, even the way you use your tongue are not the same. Just like your brain needs time to get familiar with Korean sounds through listening, your mouth and tongue also need time to get used to producing those sounds. That's what shadowing is for. After you've listened to Korean content enough to understand it well, play it again. This time, repeat each sentence out loud right after the speaker, like an echo just slightly behind them. Start with simple and slow content. This is the easiest place to begin, because no one is watching, there's no anxiety, it's just your mouth practicing sounds your ears already know. Second, talking to yourself. Once your mouth starts to loosen up from shadowing, the next step is to create your own Korean sentences out loud, just for yourself. Each evening, try to walk through your day in Korean. For beginners, the best place to start is with food and daily basics like what you eat, what you drink, what you buy. That's more than enough to start. As you become familiar with Korean, your sentences will naturally grow too. Third, real conversation with the right partner. Solo practice has its limits. Whether you're shadowing or talking to yourself, you're still alone. Language is a tool for connection. It exists so people can share thoughts and get to know each other. That only happens in real conversation. So, eventually, you need a real partner. It could be a language exchange partner around you or from the language exchange app, a Korean friend or coworkers, or even someone at a Korean restaurant you go to often. And this is something many people overlook. The kind of partner you choose changes everything. There are good partners and bad partners. Bad partner. A bad partner brings up topics that are far above your level. They correct every mistake immediately, which makes you nervous and shifts your focus away from the conversation, away from the meaning, and onto trying to build perfect sentences. They interrupt when you pause, and they speak quickly without using visual support, body language, or patience. A good partner. A good partner is completely different. Think of them as your friend who speaks Korean, someone who supports you and builds your confidence. You learned first language this way, from your parents. A language parent does the same for you with Korean. Good partners use body language and visual clues to help you understand. They show things, point at things, and give you context so you can follow along even if you don't catch every word. They wait patiently when you need time to find your word. They care more about whether your meaning is clear than whether your grammar is perfect. Do you remember the affective filter? When you feel safe during a conversation, your anxiety lowers, the wall begins to disappear, and your brain becomes more ready to absorb the language. Just like your parents did when you were learning your first language. They create an environment where the language feels safe to grow. The right partner makes Korean feel safe and familiar. The wrong partner makes it feel like a test you're failing. And honestly, this is where many learners struggle. Finding a patient, supportive partner is much harder than people think, especially in the beginning. And that's exactly the problem I wanted to solve. For the past 4 years, I've been building a Korean conversation course around this exact framework. Not a course built around memorization, a course built around familiarity. A system that helps Korean become familiar through listening, repetition, and safe, real conversation. First, you get listening content matched to your level, expression-focused videos and conversation clips you watch on repeat, until the expressions start to feel familiar to your ears. Then, you have one-on-one conversation class that help you turn that familiar Korean into real conversation. This isn't about memorizing scripts or copying phrases. It's about becoming familiar with Korean and becoming familiar with having real conversations in Korean. And I know what some of you are thinking. I'm too much of a beginner for conversation. I need to study more first. I get that. But this course is also for people who have just started learning Korean. You're not behind. You don't need to wait until you're perfect to start speaking. If you're not sure where to begin, that's exactly what I want to help you figure out. So if this sounds like the way you want to learn Korean, you can book a one-on-one call with me through the link in the pinned comment. Before we meet, I'll send you a few level-based listening videos. You can try them first, and then we'll talk about what felt easy and what felt difficult, and where your Korean is right now. The goal of the call is simple, to help you find the right starting point and to match the good conversation partner with you. I've set the first call at $9. This helps me keep the call personal and make sure I can give each student real attention. If you decide to join the conversation course later, I'll take that $9 off the course price. And if the call doesn't help, I'll refund it. I genuinely just want to help you find the right starting point. So don't rush. Korean takes time, a long time. But little by little, it starts becoming familiar. And one day, you realize the sentences are just there. Appear. I'll always be here to support you. So, see you in the next video. 화이팅!